Now I'm going to move on to some questions that I received from a viewer. So one of the questions is, do you have to change them if you move to another province?
Generally, contracts, if they follow all of the ingredients that and the legal requirements of Ontario, they are generally enforceable across Canada. However, what we always ask our couples is to, the easiest way, the best way is to connect with a lawyer in the province that you're about to move or you're considering moving, because they may have differences in the legal requirements of treating a prenup or a cohab agreement, or how they view division of property or support. So you may want to make sure you understand the laws there, if there's any differences, and how your agreement would line up with their laws. But generally, it is enforceable across Canada.
Okay. Do you think that couples need to kind of review this every 10 to 15 years because laws change so frequently?
You can.
Yes, I think so. And it's not even about the laws changing necessarily. That's one of the reasons, maybe, if the laws, but I mean, that should not really, in the grand scheme of things, I believe that should not necessarily impact, but your situation may change.
That's true.
So when one of the things that I believe should be included or at least contemplated to be included in a cohab agreement is a review time, a review trigger or period. So that when, if you've signed the agreement 15 years ago and you have not taken into account, situations such as having 3 children, or your new financial situation was not contemplated at the time of signing the agreement 15 years ago, then those sort of should be triggers for a review of the contract at that time. So I think that could be a really good method to have a strong agreement that you can rely on for the long haul.
So I mean, that one of the fears I think that people have in going into a contract is that I think maybe there's an assumption that once you get a contract, then it's like you can't change it ever. But this is a great idea that you're saying that you're incorporating these triggers so that it's reviewable. Going on to this, another question that the viewer had, they said, can you have a contract that protects retirement funds like TFSAs and RRSPs and things like that? So I'm assuming yes. Eva?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the main components. People do that all the time. So they'll often, especially very wealthy people, or where there's a financial imbalance and one person is very wealthy and one person is not, they'll often use the cohabitation agreement or the marriage contract in that sense to say, okay, you know what, my TFSAs not included in the division, in equalization. These are the accounts. I'm going to contribute throughout the marriage, but I'm not dividing them. It's very common for people to do pensions. Another thing that's very, very common is, especially nowadays with the housing crisis that we're in the GTA especially, people often receive gifts from their families, right, to put a down payment on the home. Technically, if that's the matrimonial home, you are essentially losing that gift. You don't have a legal entitlement to it back. However, if you can put that in your marriage contract or your cohabitation agreement. If we break up and we sell the house, the first 100,000 that represents my down payment comes back to me. Then we split the proceeds. You can do that all the time. I often say that marriage contracts are like life insurance policies. You hope you never need it, right? But it's good to have for the just in case.
Right. Now, are there subjects, topics or issues, I guess I should say, issues that you cannot contract out of?
That you cannot contract out of. Well, Laura kind of mentioned it before. We cannot do parenting or decision making for children or child support in a cohabitation agreement or a marriage contract. And that is different than a lot of the United States laws. It's very common in the United States that they can contract for children that have never been born. We don't do that here. So if anything, sometimes when I talk to people about cohabitation agreements, marriage contracts, they often conflate the information they read online about what you can do in an American contract versus a Canadian. In a Canadian, we can't negotiate terms for the support of a child that's never been born.
I see. Okay, but for a child that's never been born, what about sort of existing children? Still no, right? Like you can't.
So there are some areas where you can contract. So for example, and this could be relevant for a lot of people, families where there are stepchildren or step parents, blended families,
Yeah.
you can contract to identify whether the non-biological parent would be responsible for child support upon a breakup. Because a child can, if they have a close relationship with their step parent, can be entitled to child support from them. The step parent's going to want to know that, right? Should know that if they're going to enter into that type of family dynamic. And so it's very common for marriage contracts and cohabitation contracts to identify if a step parent has a financial obligation for a child.
I thought you could never talk about child support in these contracts because it's been drummed into me. Well, the child support is a right of the child. Therefore, you cannot have this. So this
is what I tell people is the law is very easy to understand, but the exclusions and the loopholes are a lot more tricky. And you're right. Technically, a court could come in and say, you know what, this child really needs financial support, and we're going to invalidate this clause. But barring those circumstances, there are a lot of families where, especially if the financial circumstances make it reasonable. So for example, if the child is receiving child support from two parents already, it may be very reasonable that the step parent isn't contributing. Right. But in any event, especially if the step parent has their own children to support, right? So there could be circumstances where you could talk about that, step parent and child support.
I was expecting you to say, that's right, anything to do with child support. No, you just cannot have that clause at all.
You know what? That's why I like family law, because it's never black and white.
It's never black.
It's always gray. It's very uncommonly black and white.